So there are passionate and strong views about voluntary assisted dying. As I've said, reasonable people can and do disagree on these matters. Other states in Australia are already moving towards schemes or have them running. Surveys have consistently found that community support runs close to 90%. I'm quite sure it's not a question of if we see voluntary assisted dying legislated in this state, but a question of when and how it occurs. I wish, sir, to acknowledge many people who've been pushing for a change in this law for many, many years. The committed folk from SAVES and other organisations who, again today, like so many other days, have been on the steps of Parliament House agitating for change. I wish to thank the many, many South Australians I've had the good fortune to have contact with over recent times, people who've shared their personal stories and encouraged change. It has been a rare privilege, sir, to share in some of the most difficult and intimate life experiences of people who've cared for a dying loved one. People like Deb, Joanne, Susan, Jackie, Nit, Bill, Angie, Dawn, Matthew and Chloe, who've shared their experience of a dying parent. I know what they mean. People like Barry, who himself has recently been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, Fern, who recently had experience and had to deal with someone in incredible pain taking their own life, or Gary, who's lived through the slow and horrific deaths of not one but 2 partners. And Liz from Woodner, who I spoke with this week. Liz's son Reese was diagnosed 5 years ago with a rare bone cancer, Ewing sarcoma. As the cancer took over more and more of Reese's body, he became more and more certain he wanted control over his own death, and he got a hold of drugs to help him do this. Each time Reese's family left him at home, they weren't sure if they'd come back to find him still alive. Reese took his own life, but the drugs he'd sourced didn't work quickly or easily, and that gave rise to an 18-month police investigation into his death. The whole process of suffering, dying, death and investigation has understandably left his family traumatised. Sir, it doesn't have to, and it shouldn't be this way. Liz, like for so many, your loss and pain has given you strength to become an advocate, and I thank you. Liz, and like so many others I've spoken to, my resolve, sir, to see change has been firmed by my own experience. When my mum was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I immediately remembered that gut-wrenching way the disease played out, in the end, with the guy who used to be the boss of me, the late Honourable Terry Roberts. Terry was a dear friend to many who were in this chamber, and many would remember his family's battle in 2005 and 2006. Pancreatic cancer is so often an excruciating, painful and certain way to die. I've spoken about her before, my mum Viv. She was a proud, fierce, strong woman, an advocate and fighter for other women, for the marginalised and for her Aboriginal community. She was a social worker and spent her life helping others. She ran the women's shelter in Mount Gambier, worked as a social worker at Centrelink and dedicated her final working years to Pangoola Manamurna, the Aboriginal Health Service in Mount Gambier. For her work and dedication, she was awarded the Life Membership of the Labor Party, Life Membership of the Australian Association of Social Workers, and awarded the South Eastern NAIDOC Lifetime Achievement Award for service to her Aboriginal community. I know for Viv, the mental anguish of knowing she would no longer be helping others was heartbreaking. It went against everything she stood for and how she lived her entire life. If one thing summed up how she lived her life, it was making sure others were able to live their life with dignity. And Viv lived her own life with great dignity, and she ought to have had the right to choose to die with the same dignity. After many chemotherapy treatments, Viv was increasingly suffering from infections and the other side effects from her cancer and her treatment. Much of her last couple of months was spent in significant pain under the compassionate care of nurses and medical staff at Flinders and Ashford hospitals. At about 4 p.m. on the afternoon of Wednesday 9th, 2017, Viv called in her husband of 46 years, myself, and her 2 other sons, and told us the pain had become too much. She told us that going on each day was harder, and she wanted to stop all her treatments. A difficult decision that we all supported. Sir, she made this decision with absolute clarity in the presence of her treating specialist. Although she'd been thinking about this for a while, the doctor wisely told her to think it over for the night. The next day, she said goodbye to her 8 grandsons for the last time and stopped all her treatment. It was, however, far from the peaceful, dignified end of life she or any other person deserves. She literally starved and wasted away with no medication food or water over 6 painful, torturous days. Viv was often in half-aware states of panic as her body finally did what her mind had decided so long to do. So it doesn't have to, and it shouldn't be this way. To all the people who've attended public meetings, called talkback radio, sent emails, commented on social media, thank you. I've heard you. I've shared and shed a bunch of tears about your experiences, and will, as you've implored, do all I can to make voluntary assisted dying a reality in South Australia. It's time to change this law. It's time to let terminally ill South Australians safely and legally choose how to end their life. People deserve to die with the same dignity that they lived their life. This is so very important to so many South Australians. I commend the bill to this chamber. Let's finally get this done.